Hello, hello. Can everyone hear me? Yes, we're good? Okay. Good evening. Welcome to Daughters of Esther. Um, okay. Excuse me. This is probably a millennial moment. Just gonna preface it. Okay. So, millennial perspective. Daughters of Esther, or D.O.E, is an organization developed to empower, uplift, and encourage. In a world that has been successful at keeping us focused on the negative, our goal is to ensure that you remember there is light at the end of the tunnel. D.O.E understands that there are layers to you and your healing. Just like you, D.O.E is comprised of multiple layers. We have our online Instagram and Facebook page that provide uplifting and motivational quotes, pictures, and messages to get you through the day. We have our moments of motivation, which are brief motivational messages. We also will be hosting in-person gatherings. Today, we bring you the Women of Wisdom, also known as the WOW segment. These WOW segments are designed to evoke real conversation with real people, starting the process of real healing. We hope you will enjoy us by sharing your thoughts, your story, and asking questions. You can do this by dropping your comments and questions in the comment bar. And we also encourage you to share and subscribe via our Facebook and Instagram page at DOE Empower and revisit these messages on YouTube anytime at Daughters of Esther DOE. Okay, so I'm Tierra Hurd. I'm excited. I'm the moderator for tonight with a group of lovely women, some of who I know and some of who I will get to know more. So excited. Um, before we start, I want to get into allow everyone to give 2 minutes to introduce themselves before we dive into the topic that we've all been anxiously looking forward to. So I'll start. I already said my name is Tierra Hurd. I'm 27 years old, and I feel as though, I don't know, sometimes I feel like I'm in limbo, if I can be honest. I feel as though I have an educational background that is seen as others as I'm very accomplished, but sometimes society makes me feel like I haven't quite reached it yet. And what I mean by that is I have a bachelor's, I have a master's. My master's is in biomedical engineering, and I'm in the process of applying to a PhD program in clinical translational sciences. However, I have some moments where I feel very confident in myself, and then other moments where I don't even know what to think of myself. So I'll explain that as the time goes on, but I guess that was a brief introduction of myself. Jade, would you like to go?
Sure, of course. Hi, everyone. So nice to be here. So nice to have the opportunity to get to know these ladies and have a really incredible conversation. And huge thanks to DOE for facilitating this. My name is Jade Latson, originally from the Midwest, but always, maybe you work at a job and you stay there for the next 50 years and that's where you retire. But, the time has changed, and I'm really excited to delve deeper into that. I personally work in the financial technologies field. So I have the opportunity to work across generations and not only learn from those individuals, but grow with them. And I'm just really excited to be here and grateful for such an amazing opportunity.
Hi, everyone. My name is Tierra Kirkwood, and I will also relate to both Tierra and Jade in saying that I also feel like I'm a woman in limbo. First, I just want to thank DOE for inviting me today to consider myself a woman of wisdom. That's quite an honor, so I'm really glad to be here today. So I am 29 years old. I turned 30 this year. Scary. And I'm someone who had a career. I spent several years working as a social worker. Right now, I'm working in public health, and I am volunteering to give that up to go to medical school next year. So I've already been accepted. So that is such a blessing, and I'm so grateful and happy. But that is so scary to be on the verge of 30 and starting something. And it makes me feel very nervous sometimes, and kind of a little insecure because by 30, you should have made it by now. You know, you should have the career and the house and all these things, the pressures that social media or ourselves, the timeline we have in our minds. And I feel like I'm not living up to that. So definitely can acknowledge being that woman in transition and what does that look like? So thanks for having me.
Okay, I'm next. My name is Andrea Buckley. I just wanted to say thank you all for setting the tone for vulnerability tonight. That's something that I'm really passionate about, and just being honest about your experience. I'm a clinical therapist, so I like to say that I have been a recipient of the gift of therapy, and then I also get to give the gift of therapy. My passion is to help people live out their maximum potential for mental wellness. And I think that our generation has really been a true staple in like raising awareness about mental health, and just making sure that, you know, it's okay not to be okay. It's okay to feel the full range of your emotional experience and not have to wear this mask when you go throughout life. And so that's who I am. I also consider myself a daughter of God. I feel like that's the most valid identity that I hold, the biggest accomplishment that I have, and it's the reason why I'm here. So that's who I am.
Y'all all set the tone so well. I'm just like, what do I say after that? Hi, everyone. My name is Morgan Randall, but I'm known as Morgan McHale. I do a lot, but the reason I do a lot is because God won't let me sit down, y'all. I'm gonna just be real. But I am a speaker, I'm an author, and I'm also known as a faith coach. So I help millennial women grow in their relationship with God to be propelled into their purpose. So I really like helping people heal. So I have a background in social work. I have my bachelor's and my master's in social work. But it's funny because I was like, okay, the millennial, right? Because we're like, oh, we're supposed to have all this stuff together by now. What's really going on? And so I realized in the time of me accomplishing so much, like I'm 24. And so I got my master's, last year, and I've accomplished all these different things. And I sat back with myself and I was like, but what do I really like? What do I really want? And so just going out here chasing degrees because that's what we have to do, and that's what looks good to society. I had to have that conversation with myself, like, do I really like this? And don't get me wrong, I love social work, but I like it in a different way. So what I do now, that's what I'm passionate about. I'm passionate about helping people heal and to grow and to be confident in who they are. And so I really do like this panel this far, like y'all being vulnerable, everything. I'm like, oh, this is going to be good. But this is just a little bit about me. So thank you for having me.
Amen. That was beautiful. That was beautiful. Okay, so let's get into it. For our first, I want to start off with some of the common myths. Some people may have an idea, some people may not. Millennials, we start, I believe, at the year, 1989 or 1990. And then I think we can go as far as 96 to 97. We begin to take off. To be honest, we might be a little before, but late in 1980s, early 1990s. So some of the common understandings, and I've gathered these from multiple platforms. So this is from radio shows, talk show hosts, different social media platforms. Millennials are seen as the first generation to feel entitled. We're lazy. We're financially illiterate. We're overly sensitive. We cannot take criticism. We don't know how to bounce back. We feel like we're very dependent on others. We don't know how to stand on our own. So I think that's a good idea. I feel like all of us in our introduction have kind of hit on how we may have been impacted by these. So the first question that I want to ask is, given some of the common misunderstandings and myths that I've mentioned, do you feel as though you defy those myths, or do you feel like you define those myths? And feel free to elaborate.
May I jump in? Funny enough, the criticism by our faces, we're like, can't take criticism. But right. But I genuinely, the other things I really do believe are misconceptions. I mean, we're on a panel with fellow beautiful, well accomplished, amazing Black women who at a minimum have, you know, bachelor's degrees and are pursuing, you know, medical degrees. And I think a huge misconception about millennials is that we're lazy. But I would like to shift that to, I think we adapt and we're agile, because we grew up, there's in certain generations, you have a defining event, right? For this generation, it's COVID. For our generation, it was the recession and 9/11. And the recession, from what my observation as a child, is that you can never depend on anyone or anything to support you. And that really catalyzed me to look into stocks, look into how do I diversify my income? Yes, I have a 9-to-5, but what else can I do? And I see that that's echoed with the other women on this panel as well. Some are business owners, some are, you know, pursuing a medical degree, and, you know, are pursuing other degrees. So I don't think that we're lazy. I think that we understand that nothing is forever, and you always have to have that hustle mentality and build your professional or personal skill set to adapt, because time can run out. That's just my personal observation.
Morgan, you raise your hand.
Yes, I just wanted to say this one comment. I think we work smarter, not harder. And so I think a lot what happened with, you know, the past generation was that, you know, they was raising families. Let's really be clear. Like, I don't have no kids. So I'm trying to get it by any means necessary. So I do believe that the culture is very, you know, hustle, but it's really more so because like they had to get locked in for their families and, you know, for the pensions and all that stuff like that. But we're like, I personally, I can't, me and 9-to-5 just don't get along for real. I'm okay. I was like, you know what? I'd rather figure it out on my own and make an income this way, and then doing what I like and having my time. So I think it's just more so that we work a little bit more smarter and not harder. No offense to those who have, like, I understand. Like I said, I don't have no kids, but I was just like, no, I just think that we are finding different ways to be expressive in the things that we love and what we're passionate about.
So I would like to pull from Jade and Morgan. Something else I would say is a defining cultural thing is we came of age with the internet. Like, you know, like I remember dial-up, you know, I remember AOL Instant Messenger. And now look at what the internet has become and the wealth of information and access to that information that we have. So we can, as Morgan said, we can, you know, let's figure this out by ourselves. Like, we don't have to follow the template that was given to us. We can say, you know what, that's not working for me. That 9-to-5 life doesn't work for me. I'm going to get on the internet and I'm going to piece some things together and I'm going to make it happen. And I definitely think that that's why one of the myths of being a millennial is we don't want a real job, because we found alternative ways to make money and love it and things like that, that we don't have to follow what was given to us.
Yes. If I can if I can jump in real quick, there was a post made by a millennial, and she said, I don't know who needs to hear this, but take your lunch break, your evenings, your weekends, your holidays, and your PTO. You agreed to a job in exchange for pay and benefits. You did not sign up to sell your soul in every moment of your personal life, your personal time. And I feel like that kind of captured literally how we feel as a group, because I feel like I know I've had my situations where if I took a job that was outside of my passion or my career, I probably stayed there for maybe about a month at the longest. I remember I took a job at a factory, and no offense against factory jobs, and I've struggled with this internally because I feel like I have family members who worked in factories, but I feel like I was there for a week and I was really struggling. Like, I was stressed. Like, I was like, I don't see how we do this. Like, there's no thought. Like, I don't feel mentally challenged, right? And I feel like I went home and I was talking to my mom about it, and she was like, listen, it's just not cut out for everybody. You know, like, you got to figure out what works for you. But I feel like my sister commented and was like, you can't never keep a good job. You always pass up a good job to do whatever. Like, and I felt like, I don't know why, but that it kind of hurt my feelings because I was like, I'm just trying to be great. But like, I feel like I can't be great in this space. So yeah, but again, I think going to the idea of finding what works for us, we're also known as that group of people where we've chosen to go after our passion and not necessarily just take a job because you need a job. But I wonder sometimes if that hinders us in that thought process. Andrea, did you want to speak on it?
Yeah, no, I don't think that millennials are lazy. I think that we grew up in a generation where we learned the value of setting boundaries. So setting boundaries with our time and with our energy. So basically, if this job is like draining me, like we're setting that boundary and saying like, okay, I'm not going to continue to move in that generation. And it may be because, like you said, Morgan, like we're not really raising families like the generation previously. But I think we're also realizing that it benefits my kids to see me doing something that I love, to see me happy, to see me involved in my passion, to see me coming home and still having energy to engage with them, if that makes sense. So I don't think it's just that, we don't have families. I think we value our time differently. And in terms of the sensitive part, that one made me laugh because I feel like we're emotionally available. And to me, that's attractive, if that makes sense. Like, I think we don't have to like armor up and have to wear this mask all the time or pretend that everything's okay. It's okay to say, like I said, that you're not okay or that you feel, something other than happy or fine or good, if that makes sense. So that's my comments to that.
And
No, go ahead, Jade.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say, like, in Andrea, when you said that, it kind of made me think of my parents' generation, and it's almost like they fought and experienced such awkwardness in working in perhaps corporate America or all these different spaces where they were literally the only one and had to compartmentalize, had to turn things on and off and code switch. And I know when preparing me to enter that same world, there's advice that I take from my dad and my aunts and uncles, but there's also advice that I'm like, I know I need to set boundaries as well. And I think that it's only a testament to what they went through to be privileged enough to set those boundaries, because we're here having this conversation about, being aware and leaving something that isn't for us. And like to everyone else's point, like they had kids, they had families, they were dealing with stresses of being the only one in a situation. And now we're in a space where nothing is absolutely perfect by any means, but we're having conversations about, what it's like to be a Black person and a Black woman and, someone who's marginalized, which was not the case as much, in terms of widely being accepted and willing to discuss. So I would say shout out to the earlier generations for kind of braving those and navigating those spaces, because that's a lot. And we still are. I'll say that too.
We are.
No, I think that's a good point, because I don't know why sometimes previous generations are critical of our generation, because you're right, they paved the way for us to, have certain freedoms, if that makes sense. So like we should be proud of that. But I think sometimes people look at our generation and they say, oh, I didn't have to work as hard, or I paid off my student loans already. So we start to be like, you got to go through that too, instead of saying like, actually, like it's a good thing you didn't have to struggle like that. You know what I'm saying? But yeah.
I'll say this too, like, because I don't want my kids to have to struggle. I don't know about y'all. So I'm like, look, if my kid don't got to go through what I went through, glory be to God. And I think I just wanted to comment on the being sensitive. I am sensitive. Oh, yes. Oh, yes, I am. But I love that, just like Andrea said, I think that's very, very important, because those are things that I feel like the previous generations didn't really too much talk about. And so it was kind of like, you do whatever I say and that's just it. And that's never okay. And I'm talking about from a spiritual standpoint and from a natural standpoint. Like, so I think our generation is one of those to be bold and courageous. So breaking those things like, no, you saying shut up to me is not okay. And I'm not going to tolerate that. And they're like, who you think you is? And it's like, no, because you're incorrect. And I think that's where the disconnect happens at, because they ain't used to that. They used to people just, all right, you gonna sit there and be quiet. And I'm like, oh no, see, I'm not gonna be rude, but I'm gonna let you know that you hurt my feelings.
And but I think that our attitude or our confidence or our boldness, I think it comes off as arrogant, and I think that's where we come off as feeling entitled. Because I feel like each generation, they handle things totally different, and I feel like it's interesting because, like it was mentioned previously, they were forced to harbor a lot of their emotions and hold everything in. But then they trained us and taught us, always vocalize what you're feeling. If you have a problem, come talk to me. But now we're talking and they're like, all right, you doing too much. Like, now you doing too much. And so I think that sometimes it just comes off a little bit different because we now have more of a platform publicly and socially to vocalize what we're thinking. We feel I feel like we have a little bit more freedom to probably take charge in public spaces without getting such harsh backlash. Like, I feel like it's a little bit more supported given the way that society is opening up and accepting different groups of people, different types of people. We're entering a day and age now where you literally are celebrated for being who you are, identifying with who you are, however you want to identify. And I feel like when we look at our parents and even our grandparents, that was not something that even made sense. And so I think as we come out and choose to be ourselves to the most and the best of our ability, I think sometimes it's almost, I don't even know what word I would put for it, but I do think there is a huge misunderstanding, and I can see how it comes off that way. Okay, so this kind of is a segue. So given the fact that we've kind of highlighted and we've addressed some of our misconceptions, I feel like we've touched on it. But in your own way, what do you think is special about you being a millennial that makes you different from other generations? Okay.
I'll go. I will touch on a little bit what I said earlier. Like, we don't accept the status quo. For example, I was in a career, I had a real job, benefits, PTO, good health insurance, but, and that's a job my parents and grandparents would have prayed for, that good, stable job, that salaried job, like that is a blessing. And, again, just not accepting the status quo, saying, I'm not truly happy in this space, in this field. I am going to leave this to chase after what I actually want, versus someone in a previous generation wouldn't have done that. And it gets hard to make those bold leaps of faith or those bold decisions because people, parents, grandparents, they're looking at you like, why are you leaving that good job? But I think that because we are able to capitalize on what makes us happy, that's definitely something that defines us differently. And it's easier to make that decision. I'm not married. I don't have kids. And that's something that previous generations perhaps couldn't have made a decision like that. So I think that like a level of independence definitely kind of makes us different from other generations.
Okay. Morgan?
I'm sorry. I was just gonna feed off of that. No, I understand, sis. Look, I was like, literally, I had got a full-time position the semester before I graduated my undergrad. They were like, we're not sure we can hire you because you don't have a bachelor's. Did it, and then I was at this job and I was like, ooh, reality set in real quick. And I was like, I need to get an education. So I literally left everything and moved to Texas, left everything, significant other, family, everybody. It was like, yeah, I have to go. And I think that's something that we all have. It's really our faith. And then also, like, I want to just say again, it's the boldness for me. It's the courageousness for me. And it's one of those things where we're just like, we're not going to back down until things change. because there's a lot of things were built. And don't get me wrong, it was a lot of great things that happened, but there are also some things that were not. And so we're like, kind of, they paved the way, but like we're smoothing out the tracks in a sense. And I think that's what's happening. So that's why we get a lot of backlash, but then you get people that's like, I love millennials who are on fire, who's doing this, chasing after your goals. And the parents, some of them sit back like, dang, I wish I could have did that. And that's really where that tension comes from, because they're like, dang, I didn't do that. Woe is me. But it's like, I understand why you didn't do it, because you had me. And so, you know what? I'm going to eat for both of us. We all going to get a seat at the table.
I feel as though when we look at and we talk about the ways in which whoever raised us encouraged us to go after some of the things that we want, I feel as though, at least for me personally, like single parent household, but my mom's education stopped at high school. And so I feel as though there was a point in my life where I seen so many people that were like, okay, so I don't really need to go to college to have a life, right? But then there was another side of me based off my peers who I went to school with, who they kind of had like 2-parent household, their parents went to college. And so it was a bit nerve-wracking because I felt like I was entering a territory that I really didn't know much about, and I didn't have much guidance. And so I think another unique thing is when we're entering those spaces, as we talk about smoothing things out, it feels rugged to us because we're kind of like trying to figure out, okay, is it this door do I go in? Nope, it's not. And I know when I started off, I talked about my education career. I did not really know what I wanted to do, but I kind of felt like I knew that I was smart. I knew that I loved science. I knew that I liked math. And so I feel like I got my undergrad in physics, and I didn't know what to do next. I knew I wasn't interested in NASA. It was boring. And if we're clear, I only chose physics because that was the first science that I didn't fail initially in college. So that was my go. But I think I wanted to choose something applicable. And so I was like, engineering is a broad field. Let's go into that. It's lots of money, lots of jobs. But then I got into it and I'm like, well, it's not hitting the same. This is not, I don't, like I didn't like it. I found it interesting enough, but I didn't find it fulfilling. So there goes that sensitive passion side of a millennial. And I felt stuck, like I felt lost, but I felt like there were some people when I talked to them, they're like, you're set, you're an engineer. Like, I don't understand what your problem is. But I feel like as a Black woman who's in engineering, the location and the setting had a huge role as well in terms of job availability, wanting to hire you depending on how much experience you had. So what are some of you guys' experiences or ideals in terms of as you're trying to navigate through your career based off where you are now or some of the things you had to get to? How do you feel like you were looked at? And what did you feel like when you were going through
it? Morgan, go ahead. Go ahead.
Every time. No, you can go.
I have last time. You go. I'll go after you.
I was just gonna say that I think for me, this is so funny that we're having this conversation and how we already set the tone for being vulnerable, because I never really thought about it until now. And I think that I was always looked down upon. Like I didn't really know too much, or you're young. And so what can you really bring to the table? And that was something that kind of scarred me, because I was just like, I ain't worked this hard for this education for nothing. And so, being in, when I got my first full-time job with benefits and stuff, it's kind of like, they didn't, because the people who were older than me, they got more of an advantage than I did, even though I had the qualifications, if not more, to be seated at the table with them. And so that was really difficult for me. Also being a Black woman too, and being the only Black person. And, at that establishment, I was just, it was really awkward because it's like, you have to watch what you say, how you say it. Oh, don't do this. Don't wear your hair like this. So it was a lot of different things of having to encounter because you just don't want to make the wrong move, to have somebody say something that's, stereotypical of how you're supposed to act and what you do as a millennial or Black woman.
I completely echo what Morgan just said, and I'm I'm a Black woman in corporate America in working in New York City. And a lot of the things that I hear are, oh, okay, there's people need to understand the difference between like implicit and explicit racism, right? Like up here in New York, a lot of people think that they may not be racist because they aren't, you know, participating in some of the activities we saw on January 6th, right? Like, but that doesn't necessarily mean you aren't contributing to, you know, of the bigger issue of structural systemic racism. And one example that I had is starting out in my career, I think this was like my second month. A woman pulled me to the side into a meeting room, and she was like, hey, and she was a woman of color. She wasn't a Black woman, but a woman of color. And she's like, hey, I want to give you some advice about how to be successful here. If I were you, I would bleach my skin or wear lighter makeup. And I would like monitor like how big my lips look. And I don't go in the sun. I would suggest that you don't go in the sun. Completely unsolicited advice. And I think that when we have these conversations, that's why I say we still have a ways to go. When we have these conversations, there are so many things that people don't realize, people of color, Black women, any other marginalized communities go through, because some of it is every day just having to, you know, swallow your pride. And I think James Baldwin said it best, like, to be Black in America is to be enraged constantly if you're aware of everything, right? But in that moment, I was so shocked. I couldn't even respond. But what really got me through is having a senior Black woman there who was my sponsor that I could go to and talk to. And I think that those modern underground railroads, yes, you're the few, but when you're not alone and you have a trusted network and you can depend on people who are older and from a different generation, or even younger and from a different generation, I think that's what really helps you sustain and navigate those disgusting waters, like in my experience or in someone else's experience. I think that relationships really help you get through traumatic experiences, and community helps you get through traumatic experiences. And having conversations like this that's why having conversations like this is so important, because I'm sure there's people on the line now who are like, oh my God, I went through that. Or like, some of us went through something similar, or yeah. So that's my answer in terms of crazy experiences in job settings.
I think for me, I think I got a little bit lucky with the two positions that I had post grad school, like very non-traditional, very like I had a lot of autonomy in the position that I was in. But with that, I would either be more educated or equally as educated as a lot of my coworkers, but I didn't have as much experience just because I'm a young professional, if that makes sense. But I battled a lot with like imposter syndrome, even in spaces where I felt like you could be yourself, you could do things however you wanted to do them. And when I first started, I started to do things like my more experienced like coworkers, if that makes sense. And now I feel like I'm starting to be like, you can be yourself, you can do whatever you want to do. You're educated, you belong here, regardless of like how much experience you have. But it took a while, like wrestling with that, if that makes sense. And I think one thing just to kind of like credit the previous generation as well, I feel like they have helped me as a Black woman feel more confident in work environments. Like where I change my hair all the time, like wear my hair however I want to, short, long, you know, being able to truly show up and be myself. And like I said, I just think I got lucky with the workplaces that I'm in, because they weren't necessarily the most diverse, if that makes sense. But I think I feel more confident, like setting certain boundaries and saying like, no, I'm not gonna, work after 5. Like I'm not answering this phone call. I'm gonna be who I am. I'm gonna do the things the way that I, know that I should do them based off like my experience, versus like thinking that I'm not qualified because I don't have, 10, 20 years worth of experience. So, yeah.
Did anybody else want to comment on it? Or would you like to?
Andre, did you see the question in the comments? There it is.
Okay. What do you say about the perception that millennials think they should be CEO after 6 months on the job?
I don't think that. I don't know. I never really heard that before, but honestly, I feel like a lot of millennials, we don't have a work your way up mentality. I would think, I think the thought that we have been talking about is like we want autonomy and freedom, not working because being a CEO of a company is going to take time. And I don't know what y'all think. I never really got that impression that like I go to a job and I think I'm going to be the CEO. Where I'm at is I'm going to the job, I'm learning what I need so I can branch out, if that makes sense, not necessarily work myself up to the top of that company.
I feel like, yeah, that's what the older generations think. I feel as though, so in the sciences, that there's not emotion science. No, like sciences don't do emotions. These are the group of people that they would prefer, some of them, to just go throughout the day without having to talk to you, if that's possible. And then there are very few people who want to talk and just are really excited about it. But most of the time, it's a space where they don't feel the need to get into emotions. It's straight facts. It's just hard work. And I feel as though I have definitely met a lot of people in our group that feel as though they come there and they've worked. We literally, let's see, the job that I'm at now, I got hired in July. And before the year was up, like I had a couple coworkers that was like, yeah, I'm definitely ready to be supervisor. So I'm just going to go talk. I'm going to go talk to our supervisors and let them know, like, if they get an opening, to call on me. And I was just like, really? Because I don't even think, like, I think we just learned our workbench, right? Like, I don't know if we know enough about the company. I think that sometimes it is very common for us as millennials. We feel as though because we have the knowledge, the mental knowledge, I feel like that is one of our downfalls. We are so book smart and we feel like we can teach ourselves. We are instant gratification. So I know myself, I feel like I don't have to always have a full lesson on something. I can probably read 2 chapters, teach myself the situation, and then I'm good to go. And so I feel like in the workspace, what that translates is you can train me for about a week. I know it, and then I'm like, I'm gonna be the best that you've ever seen, right? And it's, I don't know why we come off that way, but yes, I do think that that is a downfall. Anybody else want to comment?
I was just going to say, I definitely agree with that sentiment. Like, I feel like in the workplace, at least in my experience, there has often been a divide with maybe like the older generation or like people with more experience versus this new bright-eyed, just graduated, ready to change the world. And I think that's it. Like, because we have all this enthusiasm, like, I just got these degrees, I'm ready, I can change it overnight. Just give me 6 months. And I think that it's older generations who are able to say, like, that's cute, we love your energy, but we've been here for a while. And if nothing else, at least consider our viewpoint. Because I think sometimes, which is a problem across the board, where maybe a new person will come in and want to change everything, but you didn't even take a chance to see what was working. You didn't even take a chance to see, like, what are the areas that we feel need to be addressed that is inadequately being addressed right now. And I think that is part of the reason for the divide. Like, it's just so much hunger and enthusiasm that you actually miss out on some of the knowledge.
The question is, would you say that you are on the older millennial side versus the younger millennial side? If so, do you agree that there's a difference in millennial mindset?
I think I'm kind of an old soul. Like, I think there are certain things that I align with from a millennial perspective, but sometimes I'm also like, Jade, are you 60 years old? Like, and I'm okay with that too. Like, I think that, and I think it kind of alludes to the earlier question around what are some of the things that we think are interesting about our generation. We were literally born with the ability to well, we weren't born with disability, but we still remember pre-internet days and remember snail mail and remember, having to write letters, blackboards, things like that. And we're that bridge between, the generation before us and Gen Z, who have no recollection of things before, a digital time period. So I think that we're in a really great position where we can appreciate some of the nostalgic things. Like, I like typewriters. I'm like, oh my God, a typewriter. Oh my God, a record player. Like I find that there's beauty in that, in having vinyls and having conversations with, I used to pre-COVID, like volunteer at retirement homes. Like I still value getting wisdom from older generations. So I don't know. I think I'm a millennial, but I'm also an old soul, I think.
No, that's real. And I think part of being a millennial is not allowing people to put you in a box. Like, I think you're going to relate, or we're going to relate to different aspects of different generations. So I don't I'm at the border, if that makes sense. So I'm on the younger side. I just barely made it type of vibe. And I don't like when people put me in a box though. But I wanted to speak really quick about the CEO thing, because I guess I do think it depends on what field you're in. But I want to send like a message to folks that are young, that I'm a person that I'm going to go after like whatever I want, if that makes sense. I think your next day is not like guaranteed, if that makes sense. So like some organizations, I do think, you got to like work your way up and it takes like a bunch of experience. But I think a lot of times we sell ourselves short, if that makes sense. So if you do have what it takes as it relates to the education, if you do feel like you have, experience, then go for it. Go for the supervisor position. Go for like whatever is next. Because I notice a lot of people have put me in a box due to my age, and I really pride myself on like trying to exceed that, if that makes sense, or just set my own expectations and kind of like ceilings, if you will. And I think that can be intimidating to someone who is like, oh, I had to wait this amount of time to get to where you are, so you should have to wait too. And that's not always true. Sometimes it is. Like sometimes you got to humble yourself. But if you connect with the right people and you listen to other people and they help you not make the same mistakes that maybe you would have learned not to make over 10 years, and you can not make it in 2, then that's what you did. That makes sense. So, yeah.
I just want to echo that, because me and her are in the same boat. I literally, I think as being a millennial on the younger side, honestly, if I would have never told you my age, you wouldn't have even known that. And so that's what I typically, honestly, I don't even tell people my age, because they're like, oh, how old? Oh, I thought you were like 35. And I'd be like, yeah, no, I'm not. But I think I am kind of like on the older side. I was born with gray hair. My mom said that's wisdom. But I just want to echo what Andrea said. It's one of those things where it's like, listen, if you got the qualifications, I feel like you should just go off. And what I mean by that is do what your heart desires. And I think that's what people kind of past generations kind of went off of, was that time frame. Like that's just like with friendships. Like you may have known somebody, 10 years of your life. How great of a friend were they to you? And then you meet somebody in a year and you feel like you've known them your whole life. And so you can't really put time on anything. It's a matter of experience. It's a matter of you just knowing, having the knowledge and things of that sort. Even when it comes to us negotiating our salaries and all of that, like you think just because, I just graduated and I'm supposed to take the lower bar. No, know your worth. That's how and I think that's what it is. Millennials be like, I'm not settling. I don't want to settle for safe. And I think that's what it is that really triggers people, because like, no, you're young. You're supposed, no. And it comes off as if I'm like, snobby and whatnot, but I'm just saying like, know your worth and add tax.
Yes, to the hashtag add tax. So given that, what is the best way that you think we can address some of these situations in which we're like, how we're viewed? Like some of the things that you said in terms of the fact that we don't feel like we have to settle. There also was not, I don't want to say complacent. Complacent isn't the right word, but like it was mentioned before, if we look at career or work, I feel like certain generations had to play it safe because there was a survival thing in the back of their head. Whereas I feel like we are definitely that generation where let's thrive. Like, let me just go forward. Let me be great. How can we address some of these issues when we look at generations that are older than us, such as X or Boomers? Because I feel as though, even though we get a lot of flack, I feel as though we also are that bridge generation because of our passion, because of our sensitivity, because of our vocalness. I feel as though I've noticed in the workplace or even just in public areas, if I've seen older people having like headbutts with like Gen Zs or even some of the younger ends of millennials, I feel as though Gen Z and some of the younger ones, they're way more social media driven because they came up in a digital age. So that is how they communicate. That's how they talk. That's literally like they don't do face to face. If you have a confrontation with a Gen Z, a Zoomer, and you do something that they don't like, they the reaction in person is very awkward. They do not know how to communicate. They like tense up, and then you be like, I don't know what's about to happen. Are we like? And so I feel like there's times where I've been that bridge to try to understand how they feel, and then also see what's happening on the other side to then merge that conversation.
I think I get like the best of both worlds with it is because it's me and there's my mom and there's my little sister. And exactly what you just said, she's the first one to be like, she'll text her feelings instead of saying them out loud. And I just be like, okay, mom, what she's really trying to say is, what she's really trying to do is, okay, no, what you really need to do is. And so I do 100% agree with that. It is really different because the way that they'll express to the internet how they feel before they express to those people or, their family members how they feel. And then you got to see it on the internet before you like, dang, like, I didn't even know I made you mad for real. And so I definitely 100% agree with that.
Anybody else want to comment on that question? Comment on that?
I will. I will just say that I think the way to bridge that is just to have open conversation like we're having now, like this platform is being able to provide right now. I think that if older generations and younger generations come to the table with the intent to understand each other, not to one up each other, say this is better, but if you come to the table to understand each other, whether you or not you agree at the end of the conversation, that really doesn't matter. But if you can respect, like, you know what, I didn't understand why you had such a hustle mentality, but now I see that it's really working for you. I respect it. I might not do it for myself, but I respect it. I think that just having those dialogues is really going to be able to change some of that, because right now I feel like people are just very comfortable saying, well, those millennials or those boomers, versus just being able to just, okay, well, let's talk about it. So, yeah.
Okay. So I know we've been talking for a while, so let's switch gears a little bit. I feel like we've talked a little bit about personal and work-life career, but leaving from the idea of relations. So we are in touch and one with our emotions. There's a healthy balance. I think we've all identified and agreed. How does that healthy balance and dealing with relations and communication? Let's talk about our dating culture. We are seeing we've definitely become known as that group. We're the hookup culture, and not to say that hookups didn't exist prior to, but I feel like dating is the definition of dating or to date is not a real thing as much anymore. You're talking is a thing. Situationship has become a new term that's developed, and if we have any groups of people that might not understand what a situationship is, it's an ambiguous entanglement with someone outside of yourself that you cannot put an accurate definition or description of what you have with that person. You just know you're involved in something. It could be emotional, it could be physical, it could be spiritual. What is dating culture to you as a millennial?
Everyone's really silent.
Exactly.
Because that's how the scene is.
Ooh, child. I was sitting here like, well, I will start because I already know I'm low-key gonna opt out of this conversation. Why? Because I view it very differently. I view it like the older folk. But that's really just because of I take my religion very serious, So for me, I'm like, I'm not just out here just to date and just to, let's just see what happens. I lived that lifestyle before, and it wasn't for me. Point blank, period. I feel like I've always been a wife. I just needed my husband to come along. And so it was one of those things where I just couldn't settle anymore. And I was like, no. So if you did not come to the table correct, as I would say, if you were not in alignment with, having God first in your life, then it was a no for me. And so I literally was like, I'm not doing this anymore. And I think it was about maybe like a year and a half or so. And then I started dating someone intentionally, and now he's my fiance. And so I was just like, when I did those things, thank y'all. Look, when I did those things, that's what ended up happening, because I was like, I can't be in situationships. Now I do feel like our culture, millennials and this culture, I don't even think it's just millennials. Let's really be clear. Let's be clear. It's not. So we're not even going to put that on ourselves. It's everybody and their moms and their dads. But I feel like, culture is moving towards more so, you got Tinder, you even got Christian Mingle. I don't even know what that's about. But just all these different things, whatever, just to, do hookups and all that stuff, where we really moved away from what it truly looks like to be in a relationship. So I think that as millennials, I ain't gonna lie, I feel like we sometimes selfish when it comes to the relationship stuff. So it's more so I want things to go my way. And if you can't do just this one thing, if you don't have, a 6-figure paying job, if you don't have a car, if you don't have this, you can't be involved with me, I can't date you. You ain't even seen homeboy in 5 years, like where he gonna be, and you already done X'd him off. And so I'm like, I think we need to take it back to the basics of not looking at the materialistic things. And I feel like you really should just pay attention to, the heart, because the heart speaks louder than words ever can.
And I also think that it's really hard right now. Personally, I'm in a relationship, but I observe some of my best friends, and they're swiping and doing all of these things. And it's like, it's very hard when your generation is used to literally ordering every single thing they want. If I'm hungry, I can DoorDash something. If I, what I mean? Like if I want to go somewhere pre-COVID, like I will go, I will Uber, so I think that, to Morgan's point, there's something to be said and observed and respected about previous generations wanting to grow with someone, and realizing that you can't order characteristics of a perfect partner for you, right? And you can pray for it, you can ask God for it, but we know that even when you pray without work, you can't manifest anything. So that's a huge lesson that I had to learn, especially being a daddy's girl and seeing this amazing example of a man growing up. I was like, oh my God, like my dad does all X, Y, and Z. Well, my dad was 26 once too, right? Like he was not that person that I grew up with. So it's going to take some growing with someone. And that doesn't mean you tolerate disrespect, right? That doesn't mean you tolerate someone belittling you. But if someone has the fundamental pieces there for you and wants to work with you and wants to grow with you and can personally, in my experience, pray with you, and you have that connection, that can't be DoorDashed or ordered or swiped. So I'm in complete agreement with that. I think that investing in someone is something that this generation definitely needs to learn. And I think that some of us need to stop listening to, some Drake songs, because 1 minute Drake is loving women, the next minute, it's something different. And, music in general, I think that, I think that our generation gets a lot of mixed messages in terms of like, I want to be in a relationship, I want to hit the club, I want to do this, right? So it's just being grounded in you and knowing what's best for you. I love Drake, by the way, no hate on Drake.
Oh, and no city girls either.
No,
No,
Yeah.
I'm single, and I think one conversation I have with a lot of my single friends is that there's not really a blueprint, if that makes sense. And so everybody has a different definition of what dating is. Everybody has a different definition of what like dating is a vehicle for, if that makes sense. And so because of that, like you have a lot of, like you said, the situationships and things of that nature. But where did my thought go? Oh my goodness. So we're talking about dating. I think a lot of times, oh, there we go. So a lot of us either grew up with seeing like really good marriages, if that makes sense. And we, we want to go after marriage, but we don't know what it took to get that. We just know that, oh, my parents was together for 10 plus years, if that makes sense. Or you got folks who, they saw the dysfunction within like their parents' relationship or some family members' relationship. And I think you come from that potentially scar in some way. Like I don't want to do relationships, or I want to do relationships, but this person got to be perfect, or they got to be not like my daddy or like my mama. And so like, I feel like we're bringing in a lot, whether it's good or bad. Even if you come from like this 2-parent household and everything's, was together, doesn't mean you automatically have these awesome communication skills or, know how to interact with people. And I think when you bring two people from two different experiences together, they say like right now, a lot of the dating pool is like folks with like anxious attachment styles or avoidant attachment styles. So like, there's just this.
Wait,
like,
can you define that? Sorry, I need to know.
Yeah. So like, sorry, anxious attachment styles. Typically, it's like people who like when they connect with someone, they get attached like really, really quickly, if that makes sense. And they're like probably already planning the wedding. That's dramatic, but that's kind of like a good example. I have anxious attachment. I'm not ashamed. And then there's also avoidant attachment style where they want to connect, but they're kind of like they fear rejection. So a lot of times like they might attach, but then they like push the person away because they're like, oh, this person might not want me. The anxious, they hold on to them because they like, I need to hold on to this person because I'm never going to find another person like this a lot of times. So they call it the like anxious avoidant trap. This is like a dumbed down version, so hopefully it's good enough people watching this, but I feel like you see that a lot. And I was reading this book, it's called Attached, and they said like people who have secure attachment styles, they in relationships type of vibe. And then you have, the dating pool, and that's kind of like what's left. So, and all that stems from like the relationship you have with your parents and like your attachment style and all that kind of stuff. But I don't know. I thought that was interesting. I think that plays a fact as well, is all I want to say in terms of like the situationship. It's not just people, oh, I just want to hook up, or I don't care about love. I think people genuinely want connection. That's a human thing. That's normal. But I think we're afraid of rejection as well. And we've been through our own traumatic experiences as well.
If I can cut in, because I do want Tiara, I want to hear your hi Tiara. I do want to hear the other Tiara's response. But again, someone who kind of hits that borderline of millennial and Gen Z, Lil Nas X, he made a post and he said, I feel like weddings are dope, but not marriage. It's time we normalize weddings without the bondage of being with someone for the rest of our life. And again, we're heavy on social media, pop culture. Drake, I have so many lines from Drake that I think the biggest one that encompasses us is we're here for a good time, not a long time. But there's also this idea within ourselves as don't catch feelings, right? Like hashtag don't catch feelings. Like I'm not trying to do that. How do you feel like that plays a role in our dating culture or even our ideals of marriage? Because I do think that there's a growing number of people that starts within millennials and then definitely Gen Z that no longer believe in marriage at all. And so there's also a divide. So Tiara.
Yeah, so I'm the oldest person on this panel. I am 29 years old. I am very single. And I would just like to provide an alternative perspective. So I'm not exactly sure what I'm going to say, so bear with me, but I have a lot of feelings around this topic. So I am someone who went to college and, followed the formula for success in a lot of ways. And I've been in 3 2-year relationships. I'm not shallow. I was never the girl who had a list like he gotta be 6 feet and with 12-pack abs. Like I am the girl, like, can he be honest? Can he be responsible? Like, I'm looking for a man of character. Well, actually he's looking for me. but but yeah, and I would say I was never a part of hookup culture. I'm someone who truly has desired to be in a relationship, always have. I desire to be married. I desire to have kids. I desire to, build this family legacy. And it hasn't happened for me. And it's one of those things, if I can be very honest and very vulnerable, it makes you feel like, well, what's wrong with me? Like, I'm cute. Like, I'm educated. I feel like I'm doing everything right. Why is it not happening for me? Like, and I will also say it's also something that I've had to have honest conversations in my time with God. Like, God, what is it? Like, is it wrong for me to have this desire? Like, is that not part of the plan? Like, let me know. Like, and it's definitely something difficult for me because, like I said, I'm 29. Like, so I'm getting there, and I feel like this has been, the older you get, the more of a pressure, like that timeline you have in your mind, it definitely becomes more real. And I can be even more honest, especially with me dipping out of a career into saying, I'm going to be a full-time student and taking on student loan debt. Like, that's a scary thing to say, like, and to still say that you want to be married and you want to have kids and all those things. And, I don't know, I've had to have honest conversations with God about like changing my mindset on what it means to date and what it means to be in this culture, and really having a true understanding of what it means to be a wife and what it means to desire marriage, because it's not a reward because you did something right. It's not an accomplishment because you did something right. That's not the intention of marriage. There's nothing wrong with you if you don't get married. And I think that especially as a woman, those are things that, when you start hitting certain age, well, what's wrong with you? Like, what's wrong with you? And I can just, like I said, just being super honest, like, I don't think there's any obvious red flashing lights about me. I think that I am a woman of God and I'm on this journey, and it hasn't happened. So I just wanted to offer an alternative perspective that just because you are of a certain age doesn't mean that you're partaking in hookup culture or situationships or anything like that. It could just be because God is still preparing you. And I think that's something I've had to like really dive into, is that, that's okay. That's okay. So, yeah.
I just want to I want to applaud you for being that vulnerable, because, and I also want to push exactly what you said. I think we need to normalize, stop asking women when they're going to be married and when they're going to have children, because there could be something deeper there, or they could just be happy and be focused on themselves. And honestly, Tiara, every accolade that you just mentioned, the most incredible and the most astonishing is, to me, woman of faith. Because there's so many trials and tribulations that we go through. The fact that you have just been accepted to medical school, you had a career, you've had all of these accomplishments, and still it's like that pressure of even asking yourself, what's wrong with me? Like, we all do that. We are all educated, incredible women who have accomplished so much, and it's still like that second guessing. And I pray that we can move out of that. Easier said than done, but I just want to applaud you for being that vulnerable, because like that is how so many women that I know feel. It's like, I've done all of this, but I haven't done that. I haven't been chosen. So there's something wrong with me.
Sorry. I was just going to respond to that really quickly. And I think that it's also hard because I feel like, at least to me, the church ignores this group of women, like this group of, 20 plus, college educated, but not married and don't have kids. Like, we don't exist in the church. Like, it's kind of like there's no support system. Or like, for example, I went to my singles ministry just to, feel support, but it wasn't like my type of single, I guess, in a sense. It was a lot of people whose spouse may have passed away or who may have been divorced and are single again. And I just feel like there's a gap in a lot of churches. So it does get hard as a woman of faith to figure out ways to build that relation. You have to figure out a ways to build that relationship with God for yourself, because you can't rely on outside sources because they're not there, which is standard across anything. You need to build it for yourself, but I digress.
Yeah.
Because sis preaching. Because I was just about to say to you, like, girl, listen, I just want to say, yes, thank you so much for being so vulnerable and just open and honest, because I mean, all I heard is like, you know, I'm not like them, but yet still here I am in this waiting period. And, you know, just, I think we also have to understand that we're always going to be becoming. So even when you do get into the marriage, and I think like where I am now, I went through that. Am I getting emotional? I went through that, but it was more so because like, I'm like, dang, I'm only 24 and I know people who's been waiting. And so I felt this guilt of like, you know, am I really supposed to get married right now? You know, I'm not 30 yet, because I was like, I want to get married at 30. You know, I was like, I still got to live my life. But, you know, God had other plans for my life. So I was like, okay, Father, go off. But it was really, that's real. Because I was like, you know, people are like, well, you know, you're getting married. You're so young. You have so much more life to live. And then you have people who's been waiting to get married. And I'm like, dang, do I deserve to be happy right now? You know, that this is happening right now. And then also seeing that people will be like, oh my God, I can't wait to get married, until you got to get married. And then you sit there like, oh, I didn't know this was a lifestyle. And I'm not saying marriage is a terrible thing at all, but it really is truly a partnership thing. And so it comes with the good and it comes with the bad. And so I just thank you so much for being vulnerable about that, because you just like, you know, I'm here. You know, when God sends your husband, you will be ready. But I think all in all, what I heard was just that you are truly enough. Like, you're doing it and you're still, you know, growing and maturing. And then even with you even taking this detour, and you're like, dang, like, I don't really know. Who's to say that you won't meet your husband in that field? You know, so it's just a matter of even, you know, being open to the possibility, which I'm not saying that you aren't, because I know that you are, but just like, you know what? It's okay. It's okay. Because at the end of the day, I feel like this, and even as me being in this role of being a fiance now, one thing that I treasure the most out of everything is that if I had the husband, if I don't, I always have God. And that's the most amazing relationship that I ever had. So even when I do get married, I still make time for God. Like, that's my number one relationship. That's who I'm married to. And then, you know, my husband is just the example of what Christ is like to the church. And so even if I didn't have him, it's one of those things of still being content where you are. And I think that millennials, a lot of millennials aren't really content. We're the hustle, right? We're always chasing. And that's why our feelings get hurt. That's why we're always comparing ourselves to other people. And that's why we have this hunger to chase. And I feel like in this season along in my life, like God has been teaching me how to just be content where I am. And understanding, like, you know what, you've done a lot, you are enough, and your value does not come from your accomplishment. Your value comes from who you are as a person.
I do, you know, if I could make a comment. First off, before I start, Tierra, you are amazing. Like, you are beautiful. And everybody, so just so everyone knows, I met Tierra my freshman year. But ever since I've met this woman, she has always been an inspiration to me. She's always been someone that I can look up to as like an older sister outside of my family for so many reasons. But one of the things that always stood out to me about you, T, is the way that you carried yourself. So even before I knew about your relationship with God, even before we got to know each other for real, like TNT, I feel as though you always held yourself to a standard that I've never seen a young Black woman do. And so I just want to give a shout out to all the young Black women that are going through some of the same things that we've mentioned, that are feeling inadequate, that are just going through this dating life, whether you're in a relationship, engaged or not, just single. Like, just keep your head up, sis. Like, adjust your crown. Your time is coming, okay? But if I can be honest, like, I feel like I'm kind of at an in between. Like, I do have a relationship with God, and I definitely take it serious. But in terms of like where that population that is not talked about, I do feel like, again, if I can be honest, I know people are watching. Don't judge me. Please don't judge me. But I feel as though I present a certain way, and I think because I come off as esteemed, as a great role model, as a great example, I feel like sometimes I have to hide some of the things that I'm actually feeling or some of the things that I go through. And so, yeah, I am a woman of God, and I know that I should wait, and I know that I shouldn't indulge in certain things. But the reality is I am human, and I do have urges. And sometimes, like when you're single for a while, and you just miss a lot of things. Like you want to feel missed, you want to feel intimacy, you want to be touched. And so I think that I definitely have had moments where I've ebbed and flowed of the hookup culture or not. But I feel like even though I knew that it was wrong, it was one of those things where it's like sometimes, and not so much now, I think I've grown in my walk with Christ. But I think that there was a point because it's not talked about in terms of how to wait, like how to actively wait, how things that you should do when you're in your waiting season to be married, if that is what you aspire to do. I think because I didn't have that knowledge, it was just a you don't do this or you do this. I feel as though when I had those moments and I went into that culture or I went seeking for something, because I didn't have that example of what marriage looks like. I did not, my father passed away when I was 4. So I would have had it, but he wasn't there. Not my fault, but I just didn't have that. I feel like a healthy male figure, a constant healthy male figure, didn't really come into my life until my early mid 20s, that I was able to actually observe and watch and see what that looks like, a healthy relationship between a man and a woman. And so I feel like my normal of what I thought I should be treated like or what I thought I deserved were toxic relationships. They were toxic examples of you do what the man says. You what like it's common for a man to not want to be bothered with you. That's normal. That's just how men are. And I feel like that's the response you get. That's a man. And it's like, okay, so as the woman, what am I supposed to do then? Like, how do I, like, how do I respond to that? And so I feel like also older people that are listening, I'm just going to slide this in. If you would volunteer yourself to maybe this is a future discussion that we can have, but what are some things that we can do when we're in our waiting season? Like, what are some things that we can do when we have those moments of, hey, I want to go back into this urge or I'm feeling this? Like, how can we actually go forward with that? But yeah, sorry. I don't know where I was going with that, but there were a lot of things that I wanted to touch on. But yeah, I do feel like I'm definitely someone. I'm not, and I said I've ebbed and flowed in the culture. I'm not saying that I tap into it like 2 days on, 2 days off, but I'm being honest to say that I've been in that. But at the same time, I do still have a relationship with Christ, and so I think as because I didn't grow up in the church, I didn't grow up with parents that were religious. So my walk with Christ has been something that I've initiated on my own. And so, in order to learn something new, you have to first unlearn all of the bad things that you've taken on. And that's a process. And so I think as we go through our process, I think this group of women, sometimes we don't get enough encouragement and support as we're trying to get through that process.
I think that's valid. And something else I would say, just add to that is, I think that it may be hard for older generations to relate to us. Like, I personally don't know anybody who's 30 with no kids and not married. I just don't know anyone from an older generation. So I think that within our generation, I have to reach out to you, to Tierra, and be like, hey, you know what? Yeah, I'm still going through these murky waters, but this is how I'm successful. This is what I'm doing, because I think that there aren't that many people who may fall into that category out of the older generations.
Yeah. No, I feel like that's real. And I think one thing I realized is like I don't want anything that like God has embraced me for, because I feel like in our generation we see stuff on social media and we say like, oh, they're in a relationship, they got a house, they got all this stuff, but we don't see like the behind the scenes. And it's a lot. I think about the stuff that I have to sacrifice for what I have And I'm like, God, if that's, I don't want, it's going to be a disaster regardless, but I don't want to be somewhere sacrificing stuff that like I wasn't even prepared to sacrifice. And I think one thing that's important to talk about when we talk about dating is this idea of the relationship you have with yourself, if that makes sense. Like that's always going to be there, even when you get married. Like I know married people who like you have that happy marriage, but you still have an unhealthy relationship with you, if that makes sense, and how you see yourself, your self-esteem. And I feel like for me, being single is not, I mean, I want to be in a relationship 100%, but I also like being, I like doing stuff for me. My money is for me, like everything for me, if that makes sense right now. And so, like, I know eventually that that's going to shift. So, how do I enjoy the freedoms that I have right now before I shift to whatever, God has for me? And I'll just say that.
And one of the things that this kind of makes me think of is one of my really close friends said, when is the last time you just like congratulated yourself or is like present with yourself? Because in our generation, yes, we're always chasing something, but and I was honest, and that was a huge like aha moment for me, because I'm used to just having to tick whatever sense of urgency or task I have for whatever life period I'm in off. So like recently I just got a promotion at work, and I'm already kind of like, thank you. But and I'm already kind of like, okay, I got that promotion. That's what I'm supposed to do. I'm supposed to work hard. Like I prayed about this, but I also matched it with work, and like I can't be happy for myself because that I grew up in a home where it's like, I'm not going to reward you for doing what you are supposed to do. And I've kind of had to shift that to say like, you know what? I accomplished this. God blessed me with this. I'm going to sit with this, and I'm going to be happy with this. And when we play that comparing game, we are never going to be happy. And I think Beyonce taught us that, right? Like everyone is like, oh my gosh, Beyonce. But then when you learned about the truth of her marriage, like no one is perfect. And so before I just encourage people on the line, and it's easier said than done, but just congratulate yourself, try to be present with yourself, and try to realize your accolades are accolades for a reason. And I think that that's also a really huge thing with Black women. Like we're taught that you're supposed to do this. You're supposed to be strong. You're supposed to like support the men in our community and be quieter because maybe they need to advance first. And that kind of lends itself to silencing our own needs and not taking care of ourselves. And to Andrea's point and Tiara's point, both Tiara's points, you have to be the best version of you before you can do that with anyone else. And I think a huge aspect of that is like being present with yourself and congratulating yourself and celebrating yourself.
I just want to, yes, ma'am. That's the answer for me, because I think it just goes back to what I was trying to say about, just being content. And only reason I say something today is because that was something I struggled with for so long. Like it's this constant race of having to climb the ladder. Like you're just constantly climbing. You're like, hey, you ain't tired yet? Oh, okay. And I had to realize like, no, I'm tired. I can't do this anymore. And just really, like, when I tell you, I had to sit with myself last year, the beginning of this year, my mistake, and write down everything I accomplished in 2020 in the midst of a pandemic. And when I got done with my list, it was long. I was like, I wrote 2 books. I did this because of everything that was going on, and just, having to feel like you have to keep chasing and keep going and keep going. You don't even sit back and be like, you're enough. Even if this list was 2 things. You are still enough. You are still valuable. You are still gold. And that's why I was just like, you know what? I think, and, just like Jay said, growing up, you're supposed to get A's. What are you talking about? Like, what? I can't get a C. C's get degrees, okay? But I'm saying, like, it's one of those moments, right, where we're just, that's how we were raised. That's what we grew up in. And I think that's why millennials are the way that they are, truly, is that we're constantly chasing, and we don't sit back and be like, you know what? Even though you didn't do your 100% today, you did that 95, you're still good. So thank you for saying that, Jade.
I just want to pull one thing off of what like Morgan said in terms of writing down your accomplishments. Something else that I challenge myself to do is write down your prayers and then go back when God answers them and put dates next to them, because it shows God's track record, like how you prove to yourself, like all that you've done. Because I think sometimes we pray for things and then like when we get the blessing, we kind of forget that we prayed for them, or like you just keep moving, you just move right past it. But you've been praying. I've been praying to be a doctor since I was a child, and it's happening. And you got to take those moments and be like, God, you did that despite all else, but working behind the scenes, you did that. And I think that having that, like I said, I have literally a sheet of paper, and I'm like, oh God, on January 2nd, you did that, and you did that. And I think it helps build your faith so that you can be prepared for that next season or to go into what he's bringing you into, because you can have that bold faith to say like, God, well, you did this, this, and this. I know you can handle this. Like if it's in your will, you can handle this. So yeah.
One last thing. One thing's for sure. Listen, one thing's for certain, two things for sure. My God never fails. Okay. And I tell my mentees that all the time. I journal pray. So I'm like, I'm writing down everything that I prayed for. Listen, people are sitting here looking at my ring. You missing the whole point of this is just the fruit of what God did. You know what I'm saying? And I think that's so important here that you even said that, because we as now you get millennials that are on fire for God, and you got the ones that be like, I don't really know. But I think for a fact that we have to give credit where it's due. It was never me. It was all him. Point blank, period. You know, he set the tone. Okay, God, you want me to go left? Do you want me to go right? And that's what it is. And I think we have to give God more credit, because at the end of the day, I think because we are emotional beings and stuff like that, when stuff start to go wrong, we're like, God, why are you doing this to me? But you're never sitting there saying, dang, God, you did this for me. You know, like, dang, God, you did do that. Like, yo, you did that too. Like, we're so quick to look at everything that's negative instead of looking at the things that are positive, that is happening, that is current right now. So I think even in the midst of, you know, everyday things that we're going through, we need to look at the silver lining and just be grateful. You know, just be grateful. Just be thankful for what you do have and where you are. And it's not to say like, you know, people be like, you know, well, at least you're not like this. No, that's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying like, you know, just be like, all is well.
Yes, amen. Y'all preaching tonight. Preaching and testimonials all in one. Okay. It's been a great talk. I've been enjoying myself. We will be closing up soon. So for our last question, I want to hit on the topic of financial literacy. What would you consider yourself a first generation financial learner? If you are, what do you think, what are some of the things you wish you knew? And if you are not, what are some of the things that your family or whomever has passed down to you? Anyone, feel free to go.
I can go. My dad's like really big on finance, so I grew up like really learning the value of being frugal, if that makes sense. But more than that, more than just saving my money, like learning how to invest my money, learning that when I got a job that you should opt into the retirement option if they're going to match, you know, whatever you're going to like put into there, what they're going to match. Like it's just, you know, free money, if that makes sense. And so I'm really grateful for that experience. I'm trying to think the other part of the question. I think sometimes it's hard to be around people who like we tend to like get our money and we spend it all the time, if that makes sense. But it makes sense if you weren't raised learning kind of like the value of like the dollar and stuff like that, and how to save and how to budget. Like every time my income has changed, I'm like, hey, like I need you to help me do this budget. It's not that I'm super good at it. It's that I'm humble enough to be like, I need you to help me like submit my income to some type of structure, if that makes sense. So I think that's been my experience, but that's like second generation, if that makes sense. So like, I'm really grateful for him, like setting that tone and allowing us to kind of like have that habit.
I think like working in the space that I work with a lot of startups and fintechs. And one of the ones that I love the most is she's a Black female founder. Her name is Tanya Van Court, and she has this company called Goal Setter. And it really uses culturally relevant content to teach kids about investing. And so that's something that I've really pushed with my cousins and with my nieces who are, well, I will push. They're 2 and 1 years old. But one thing that has really made me aware is just thinking about multiple streams of income too. Like, I know we kind of touched on this earlier, but it's so important. And I was really shocked that one of the conceptions of or perceptions of millennials is that we aren't financially literate, because at least the friends in my group, we're always thinking about like talking about stocks and talking about like drop shipping and how to be like, make your dollars, you be the CEO of your dollars and make them work for you. And I think that one of the ways that that's impacted me, I'm going to be that aunt who's like, you get $25 for your birthday, but everyone has to pay tax. So give me $5. You know what I mean? Like, even teaching things like that, because your paycheck is not, if I knew like what I made in the gross salary versus what, Uncle Sam takes out, that was a huge wake up call for me. I was like, oh, okay, I don't get this money. Cool. So yeah, I think I'm starting to be cognizant of how can I prepare the young people in my family about being, more financially aware, whether that's being the mean aunt who takes like $5 of taxes, which I'll secretly give to their parent. But, I think those kinds of things are really important, or teaching them to save for what they want to are extremely important. So there are a lot of really great resources out there now and apps that I would encourage the audience to look into for their own kids and teenagers.
I'll say something. I would say, to Jade's point, I feel like millennials do have some level of financial literacy, but I feel like it's sometimes whatever. It's sometimes segmented. So I feel like one huge example of that is the amount of money people spend on their degrees, but then they get degrees in things that they can't make that money back on. So I do feel like there's financial literacy in terms of people know now that you need to like save for retirement and things like that. But you don't think about maybe like the other side of investment of, let me spend as least money on this degree as possible with maximum return. So, and just to answer your general question, Tiara, I feel like I'm learning financial literacy. Like, my family was one that they were making it work. There was not extra. So when you get to a place where you do have disposable income, I like budget. What? I make this money. I'm gonna go buy the latest and greatest. So it taps back into what we were talking about, learning to be content, and then recognizing like, no, this is a need, this is a want, and budget isn't a bad word. Financial literacy isn't hard. It's basic math. And I think sometimes people just get overwhelmed because money can be emotional. Money can touch those sensitive parts of ourselves. Money can be scary, but just finding ways to make your money work for you. Andrea said it earlier, make her money submit to the plan that she had. And that's exactly it. Like, a budget doesn't mean that you can't go and, go to Target, because your girl loves Target. Like, it just means that when I go to Target, this is my dollar amount and you can't go over it. Like, you can give yourself freedom within those restrictions. So yeah.
You can say something, Morgan, if you want to.
I think mine is slightly different. So like, I literally am teaching myself everything. Kind of grew up in a place where we robbing Peter to pay Paul. And so now being in this place where I am now, it's one of those things where it's like, I'm getting rid of my poverty mentality, my poverty mindset. And it is hard because it's like, just like Tara just said, like, all right, I can go to Target and buy myself this, bag or something if I wanted to. But my mindset is like scarcity. I'm like, no, I can't, because if I don't budget this out, if this doesn't go like this, like I have to have, some type of padding under me, because if I don't got me, who got me? And I'm gonna bring God into it. God be like, I have you. And so I'm learning that alone, where it's just like, the giving and, you can do this with your money. Like, and God's like, I have so much more for you, but do you see it for yourself? And I'm like, ooh, you got me. So just learning all these things right now is really a stretch, such a challenge for me, because the little bit that I am learning, I'm teaching those who were before me. And so I'm like, oh, did you know this? Oh, did you know that? And it's definitely, I would say for my last comment, the millennials, we are breaking barriers, but then we're also going back to tell the knowledge that we've learned. And I think that's where the difference is between us and them. And it's no offense to them, but it's just like, you know what? I don't think you learned that correctly, which is okay. I'm not even gonna fight you about it, but I'm gonna just let you know this is another way that we could do this, and it's a little tad bit more simpler. And I would say always just do it out of love.
No, that's real. I'm kind of with you, Morgan. I definitely grew up with the rob Peter to pay Paul, even though Peter didn't have it at the time. Um, I think I'm definitely in a place, like I said, I recently just moved out of state. Um, and I think I know, well, two of my cousins that I recently lived with, they had to experience, and I apologize again. They dealt with all of my traumas of no, we can't get that. I can't afford to get that. I can't afford to get that. Even though I had it or someone had it, and it's not that deep, right? Like I think literally they just had to say it is not that deep. But again, I think I had to switch my mindset. So unlearning those negative behaviors, I had to switch that it's okay to live and you shouldn't just be surviving. I was literally just surviving. And so I'm now learning to live. But again, I moved to a new state and I know I have support at home, but they're not here. And so that having to budget, being mindful of my money again, new income more than I've made before, career progress moving forward, like it was said, as your income increases, um, so does the price of certain things, more things you have to pay for and cover. So it's all about a balance. But ladies, I just want to say that you guys have blessed me on tonight. I've enjoyed talking to you. I know everyone else that's listened had to enjoy something in it. So to close out, I want us to go around, and I would like for you guys to say like one last encouraging word or a final thought from like the millennial perspective. Jade, you can start.
I don't know. I think I'm in trouble because my uncle who's watching this, my aunt and uncle, just said that I owe them back taxes for all the Christmas and birthday presents. But no, one of the things that I would leave the audience with is first I would say thank you to any generation, and especially the older generation. And I think that a lot of the times when we talk about these rifts, when we actually get in a room, there's nothing but love and like wisdom sharing. So I would express gratitude about that. And I would also say thanks for, being one of the generations that when you walk in a room, I love this saying, when you walk in a room, even if you're the only one, you're never the only one, because you are the manifestation of someone's prayers and someone's wisdom. And so I have to say thank you to that generation. For people that I don't know, people that I know, just God bless you. And thanks so much for this conversation. And thank you to all these ladies. I'm like definitely going to hit everybody up afterwards. So thank you.
As my wrap up thought, I will just say, as millennials, in your success, don't forget about God. Like, I feel like so many times we start being successful and we think it was our own strength, our own might that got us there. And don't get me wrong, faith without works. I mean, we know that, but don't forget that God is your CEO. And in that hustle and grind culture, like that relationship needs to be cultivated so you can reach your ultimate potential. So yeah, we are the generation with multiple streams of income and, doing this and doing this, but don't forget your source, the source of your strength. So yeah.
I just want to echo everything that y'all have said so far. I do want to say thank you to the past generations for sure, just because of like y'all paid this way up until this point. But then I also do want to echo what Tiara said too. Like, God is a CEO, and I give all credit, all the glory to him, because I would not be where I am without God. I will also just say that we have to, be in a place where we are also open to, I don't feel like it's anybody on this panel, by the way, but I think millennials need to be more open to, hearing and understanding past generations, and also the one that comes after us. Because at the end of the day, whatever generation that you are a part of, we all need one another. And that's the way that you do it. And it really is with love. And so I would just say, leave it with love at the end of the day, even if you don't necessarily understand where they're coming from per se, but agree to disagree, and always make sure that your heart is right, because at the end of the day, that's what it's truly about. Like, as long as you had a pure heart posture, I mean, you can't really go wrong.
Well, I just wanted to say thank you so much for inviting me to be on this panel. I always feel really blessed and grateful when I'm surrounded around people who just I can grow from and learn from, and just, I don't know, God's just good. Like, this moment is purposeful, if that makes sense. I guess the thing that I would want to say is, I think it's really important. We talked a lot about tonight, and I just want people to know that, like, you're worthy, if that makes sense, but you have to be careful, like, what your identity is wrapped in, if that makes sense. So if it's wrapped in your accomplishment, if it's wrapped in your relationship status, if it's wrapped in the amount of money that you make, if it's wrapped in how many mistakes you've made, it could be pretty dangerous. So like me, like, I try to like have my identity wrapped in God, because that's consistent, if that makes sense. And I've noticed no matter what I accomplish, no matter, how I like obtain success, it's never fulfilling if I don't have God. And I've seen that in other people's lives as well. So I just want to encourage people to focus on the relationship that they have with themselves, focus on their spiritual development, their emotional development. Like, that's the foundation to me of success. I don't really care about anything else, because if it's not built on a strong foundation, it's going to crumble. So thank y'all so much for letting me be here, and have a good night.
Amen. And then I have one final quote that I feel like was like a good summation of this. And it comes from George Washington Carver. It says, "Be kind to others. How far you go in life depends upon your being tender with the young, compassionate with the aged, sympathetic with the striving, tolerant of the weak and the strong. Because someday in your life, you will have been all of these." And so with that, again, I think that ties in all generations, past, present, future. And just it speaks to the need and the important necessity to just always remember that you're human, but others are human as well. And so again, I just want to say thank you for everyone tonight, the ladies, the audience, and I hope everyone has a great night and that they've enjoyed this.